We both come from big families, so obviously, it's fun to have a lot of siblings, but sometimes that's just not in the cards, or it's just not in God's will, and you can, be pro-life in your everyday life.
Parents and doctors shed light on the benefits of natural family planning, as we're reminded of Catholic Church teaching about bringing new life into the world.
Have you ever thought about what it means to die well? I'm Alan Holdren, and I'm in Atchison, Kansas, where I'm looking for answers with students, professors, and the Benedictines who pray daily for a happy death.
Wise words of guidance for all of us on dying well in a special report.
If you see that someone's working 10 to 12 hours a day for $15 a day, I don't think that will get them anywhere in this life. I think it will keep them down, and I think it won't help them.
EWTN News In Depth travels to the Caribbean to search for the root causes of migration. What makes a person leave their birthplace, risking it all, to start life all over again? Insight from our trip to the Dominican Republic.
By hook or by crook, get here, and it will all be fine.
Absolutely.
And we talk to the mayor of Lisbon, Portugal, as the body faithful is encouraged to come to World Youth Day this summer. EWTN News In Depth starts now.
Our fertility is something good, should never be treated as a disease, right? When we take birth control, we're treating our fertility as a disease.
A Catholic obstetrician gynecologist speaks out in support of natural family planning, which our Pope and bishops say is the way for Catholic couples to plan for and conceive their children.
Io ho sgridato la signora, tanti bambini hanno fame.
This as Pope Francis urges Italians on Friday to have more babies. Appearing at a conference about the birth rate crisis in Italy, the Holy Father decried the country's historically low birth rate, saying, for all societies, family growth is a key indicator of people's hope in the future. Hello and welcome to EWTN News In Depth. The continuation of new life and how we choose to bring children into this world is at the core and foundation of our Catholic faith and church teaching. In a U.S. society deeply divided over that issue, with court battles and controversies raging from the legality of abortion to the use of contraception, we start today with some key news about where America is headed on this topic. It all comes back to how prospective parents make decisions about welcoming the next generation. On Wednesday, a panel of advisors to the Food and Drug Administration unanimously voted 17-0 to recommend the sale of an over-the-counter birth control pill for the first time in American history. If the FDA follows the panel's recommendation, the drug, known as the O pill, will be available without a prescription to anyone shopping in a drugstore, including young teenagers, without age restrictions, and without doctor consultation. The medication has been available for 5 decades, but only by prescription. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists is backing the request. But the Catholic Medical Association is opposed, questioning the safety of over-the-counter birth control and easier access, it says, would help sex traffickers, and noting the loss of simultaneous physician screening for ovarian and cervical cancers, as well as sexually transmitted diseases. FDA staff has also raised concerns about proper labeling and whether women at medical risk of breast cancer should be taking the pill. The FDA is not bound by the panel's recommendation, and a final decision is expected this summer. As that debate continues, a Washington Post ABC News poll this week gives new insight into what Americans are thinking about the FDA-approved abortion pill, mifepristone. Future use of the pill, now on the market for more than 20 years, became uncertain after a federal judge in Texas suspended its use last month. His decision was immediately appealed all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which preserved full access to mifepristone pending further review by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Washington Post ABC News poll released on Tuesday found 66% of Americans believe mifepristone should remain on the market in the United States. 24% say it should be taken off the market. Another 11% have no opinion. The polling question did not include any concerns about mifepristone's medical risks. Mifepristone, in combination with a second abortion pill medication, is used in chemical abortions, which account for more than half the abortions in America. The FDA says the drug underwent rigorous trials before becoming widely available more than 2 decades ago. It's legal in more than 90 countries around the globe. But a group of pro-life medical groups, including the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, filed a lawsuit challenging the abortion drug's approval, saying the FDA disregarded evidence of dangerous side effects and complications. In the meantime, we learned this week which 3 judges on the Fifth Circuit will be handling the abortion pill litigation next. Judge James Ho and Corey Wilson were both appointed to the Circuit Court by President Donald Trump. Judge Ho is on the record in a previous opinion citing the, quote, moral tragedy of abortion. Judge Jennifer Elrod was appointed by President George W. Bush and has protected pro-life laws in the past. They will hear arguments in the abortion pill case next week. The U.S. bishops have expressed support for legal efforts to restrict mifepristone. We hope that the final ruling will result in removal of chemical abortion from the market altogether. Abortion is never the right choice for a difficult or unexpected pregnancy. That quote from Bishop Michael Burbidge, chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Pro-Life Activities. Pope Francis weighed in recently on the issue of medical intervention that prohibits new life. In a message to a natural family planning conference late last month, he endorsed natural family planning, saying the use of methods based on the natural rhythms of fertility should be encouraged. Citing the Catechism, he emphasized birth regulation based on self-observation and the use of infertile periods is in conformity with the objective criteria of morality. These methods respect the bodies of the spouses, encourage tenderness between them, and favor the education of an authentic freedom. And how exactly does natural family planning work? Reporter Catherine Hadro talked to a Catholic couple who achieved success after many heartbreaking losses, and a doctor who has guided many others along this path.
Kevin and Diana O'Connor always thought having a baby would come easily.
I remember as a kid, I just thought people are just like, oh, I want a baby. Okay, you have one, and it's just not that easy all the time.
Both were raised Catholic and were open to life. They eventually did get pregnant, but tragically lost their baby to miscarriage. And then they suffered another miscarriage, and then another one.
Being the woman, you're like, if fertility doesn't work out, you just feel like it's your fault, it's just thoughts that go in your head.
The O'Connors moved to a new town in Maryland and started seeing a new doctor, a Catholic and pro-life OB/GYN, who suggested they switch what type of natural family planning method they were using to the Creighton method. A method the doctor said would be better tailored to address Diana's long and irregular cycles.
Yeah, that was very frustrating. I feel like for you physically and mentally to have 70-day cycles or stuff were just don't make sense.
Natural family planning, commonly called NFP, is a way of identifying the 6 or 7 days in a woman's cycle when she can get pregnant. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops define it as the scientific, natural, and moral method for married couples to either achieve or postpone pregnancy. The O'Connors took a Creighton NFP class, got a Creighton instructor, and their physical paper Creighton chart, charting that ultimately led to medical testing.
I've had a bunch of lab work, a bunch of different scans and ultrasounds.
Diana's doctor identified she had low progesterone and prescribed her to take progesterone on certain cycle days. Balancing her hormones and regulating her cycle eventually led to the O'Connors getting to meet one of their babies for the first time, their daughter, Monica.
Yes, that's Dad.
And now, not quite 2 years old, Monica is already a big sister, with the new baby O'Connor due any day this May. The O'Connors are clear that progesterone is not some magical pill. They've suffered 2 additional miscarriages while on their progesterone regimen. But they do feel grateful for the increased knowledge NFP brought them.
Sometimes the teachings of the Catholic Church are hard, and you're tempted to do all of these other things that might get you what you want, which is a baby.
Dr. Mary Ann Sora of Ascension St. Agnes Natural Fertility Care in Baltimore is the O'Connor family's OB/GYN, who has walked with them in their fertility journey. But learning to embrace and advance NFP for her patients was a journey for Dr. Sora in and of itself. In her early years as a doctor, Sora says she believed artificial contraception was good and basic health care, but she grew increasingly uncomfortable in prescribing it as a Catholic OBGYN.
I sought spiritual direction a few times, and then ultimately this one priest was like, "This is really wrong. You are participating in something evil." And at that point I felt that God was calling me to stop.
It was that decision, Sora says, that ultimately made her a better doctor.
Sometimes birth control can be used as a Band-Aid without really understanding what the underlying problem is. And when I didn't have that in my back pocket anymore, I was really forced to learn more about really what were people's underlying problems.
Sora became trained in NAPRO technology, which is when you implement the Creighton NFP method for medical use.
The most common medical conditions that I use NAPRO for is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So with those women, they are not ovulating and they have elevated testosterone levels. So getting to the underlying reason for that, doing surgery actually is a big part of NAPRO.
It's not just Catholics and pro-lifers who are interested in natural family planning. There seems to be a growing interest in NFP in our wider culture as well.
Women ditching hormonal contraception for more natural methods is trending in society and online.
I've been on 5 to 6 different types of birth control, and during that period, I developed cystic acne.
The hashtag getting off birth control has millions and millions of views on TikTok, with videos like this one pointing out its health concerns. Meanwhile, there are a growing number of smartphone apps allowing women to chart their cycles, from tracking periods to temperature and beyond.
It can be for anybody. You don't have to be Catholic or Christian to do this.
From pop culture publications to much more sophisticated publications, there's talk about understanding how your body works, right? Because we're always about empowering women, right? And that's what natural family planning does. Just knowing how your body works empowers you.
Dr. Sora says embracing natural family planning brings medical benefits, marital benefits, and also difficult spiritual lessons.
Sometimes it's hard. You're afraid to be pregnant. You're afraid to rely on natural family planning. You can't get pregnant and you want to do IVF or something else. It's very much like our faith and following Christ. Sometimes the journey is beautiful and filled with joy. And sometimes the journey is really hard. And you just rely on your faith and know that the Blessed Mother has you in her arms and that Jesus is walking with you.
Catherine Hadro, EWTN News In Depth.
We're joined by a leading voice advocating for natural family planning. Dr. Marguerite Duane is a family physician and co-founder and executive director of FACTS, the Fertility Appreciation Collaborative to teach the science. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that you had this experience, but Dr. Marianne Sora told Catherine that she was shocked. She did not learn about NAPRO in medical school. How are you working to educate the next generation of medical doctors on this?
Thank you so much for having me here. And yes, this is a major issue in lack of our medical education. At Facts About Fertility, our mission is to educate the next generation of medical professionals, starting with students and residents, about the science underlying fertility awareness-based methods. I myself never even heard the term NFP or fertility awareness or cervical mucus as a medical student. It wasn't until I was a resident at Lancaster General Hospital in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, when I first was exposed to the Creighton method. A decade later, as a faculty member at Georgetown University, I had the opportunity to offer a small group elective to 9 first-year medical students at Georgetown, and their response was overwhelmingly positive. This was the most clinically relevant information they had learned. It was practical. It was basic reproductive women's physiology. And one student was like, this is something every medical student should learn. And so we started FACTS, and that elective of 9 students has now grown exponentially. This year alone, we will educate almost 300 medical students from 99 different medical schools. And now we're looking to expand this education to nursing programs as well as residency programs. Again, to equip the next generation of medical professionals so they in turn can educate and support patients who are looking to address and manage their fertility by understanding it and working with their bodies.
It's really difficult, especially now when you see a growing number of students who are opting out of becoming OBGYNs and are lowering access to this kind of medical information, but also support from doctors. Dr. Duane, NFP can be used to identify and treat PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, as mentioned in the report. What are the other medical advantages to this?
Yeah, there's so many advantages to charting the female cycle using natural methods of family planning, or as we like to refer to them as fertility awareness-based methods, because it highlights this is so much more than simply family planning. This is understanding and addressing a wide range of women's health issues, including polycystic ovarian syndrome, premenstrual syndrome, endometriosis, painful periods, postpartum depression, infertility, and more. The reality is that the chart of the female cycle that women learn to create when they learn a natural method of family planning can actually serve as a fifth vital sign that even the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists recognizes as a valuable tool in addressing women's health issues. So again, fertility awareness-based methods can be used to address a wide range of women's health issues. And when couples use it from a family planning perspective, it can help them to truly plan their families, whether they're trying to achieve a pregnancy or if they find it necessary to postpone or prevent a pregnancy using natural family planning.
Digging into what you just said about national medical associations, do you think that the medical community is becoming more accepting that fertility is a vital sign of a woman's health? And what are you seeing firsthand?
I'm definitely seeing it in the next generation. I mean, among my colleagues, we learned, and I learned, like Dr. Sora, that the birth control pill is the panacea for all that ails women. If she has irregular cycles, you put her on the pill. If she has painful periods, you put her on the pill. If she has acne, you put her on the pill. Well, what I later learned is that the pill does not actually treat the underlying causes of most of those conditions, but as Dr. Sora noted, is a Band-Aid, simply suppressing the cycle and not getting at the root cause. In the next generation of physicians, we are teaching them, and we are seeing students take our elective who are going into it because they're interested in women's health and they're interested in family medicine, not necessarily because they're Catholic or because they're doing it for faith-based reasons, but because they recognize that this is true women's health care. And so it is encouraging to see, again, our elective from 2018 to 2020 in a 2.5-year period, we had 120 medical students taking the elective. The next year, in the middle of the pandemic, because we were already poised to offer our education online, we doubled the number of students. And our numbers are only continuing to increase, not only through our electives, but also through our conferences and our CME course. So there's so many more physicians that we're seeing. Recently, we had a OBGYN physician who has been in practice for years in California sign up for our CME course and said he learned so much in that course that he never learned in his many years as a practicing OBGYN. So if doctors and medical professionals are open to this information, they can truly expand the options that they're offering women and really get at the root cause to restore the reproductive cycle to the way it's designed to function.
Well, that's really important in terms of what you're doing to give understanding and capacity to these doctors and student doctors. But what about the user? Women's Health Policy reports a 9% decrease in oral contraceptive use between the years of 2002 and 2017. And meanwhile, more and more natural fertility apps are being developed for women to use on their smartphones. What do these trends reveal to you about women who are looking for care? Are more women opting for natural fertility methods for reasons other than faith?
Absolutely. I would say women are waking up to the reality of their body, the way that it is designed, that our hormones are not a problem, and that taking synthetic hormones that can suppress and cause a wide range of issues. The reality is our reproductive hormones play an important role, not only in reproduction, but in our mental health and our overall health. And many women who have been on birth control find that it causes so many side effects that they don't want to do it anymore. So they're pursuing other avenues. Again, with fertility apps, as you noted, they are exploding. I think they're the second highest category of apps. And in fact, Facts About Fertility did a research study on fertility apps that we published in 2015. And we specifically looked at apps that were being marketed for women to use to prevent pregnancy. At that time, there were nearly 100 apps on the market. Now there are nearly 1,000 apps on the market. But the reality is Many of these apps are not evidence-based. They're not rooted in the medical science. And so I caution women, I tell them, buyer beware. And remember, women, you are smart. You are smarter than your smartphone. The best thing to do is to learn to chart your cycle with a trained instructor who can provide the appropriate guidance and instruction so that you can learn to interpret your biomarkers or those signs that you observe to indicate when you may be fertile and when you're not.
That's right.
An app can be a terrific tool to facilitate tracking, but really women should learn to interpret their signs and not rely on their phone to tell them when they may be fertile or not.
Right. Let the user be the one that actually leverages the technology. Well, doctor, thank you so much for this and for the great advice. We hope that this is useful for our viewers. Thank you.
Yes, we hope so too. And we welcome them to visit us at our website, factsaboutfertility.org, to learn more.
Absolutely. There's much more ahead on this edition of EWTN News in Depth. Some special deep dive reporting from our team of correspondents. Next, we tackle a critical topic we hear so much about as we visit one origination point of immigration. We'll be right back.
What is the real cost of putting sugar in your coffee each day? For you, it may not be much, but for the Haitian migrants who work these sugarcane fields in the Dominican Republic, there's a lot of risk and sacrifice. I'm Mark Irons with that story coming up.
Next, immigration in the news. We travel to the root of the issue to learn the mindset of those desperate to leave their homeland for a chance at a better life. And later, Lisbon, Portugal opens its arms to usher in World Youth Day 2023. We have a preview of an event the Pope says will change lives and strengthen faith. EWTN News in Depth will be right back.
Bracing for a surge at the U.S.-Mexico border. Title 42, the policy put in place in 2020 to stop the spread of COVID-19, gave the government power to swiftly deport migrants at the southern border. It officially expired at midnight on Thursday. In the days leading up to the expiration, the number of migrants at the border and crossing the border dramatically rose. Several Texas border towns declared states of emergency after cities like Brownsville became overrun with migrants. Some police departments on the U.S. side placed extra special auxiliary forces at the border in the hopes of mitigating migrant flow. The Biden administration announced that the moment Title 42 ends, Title 8 is reenacted.
An individual who is removed under Title VIII is subject to at least a 5-year ban on re-entry into the United States and can face criminal prosecution if they attempt to cross again. We have surged 24,000 Border Patrol agents and officers, thousands of troops, contractors, and over 1,000 asylum officers and judges to see this through.
In the meantime, House Republicans voted on Thursday on the Secure the Border Act of 2023, aimed to address the immigration crisis. The bill would hire 22,000 Border Patrol agents, update technology, and resume construction of the border wall. It is unlikely to become law as Democrats who hold a Senate majority oppose the bill, and the White House already threatened to veto the measure. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration sent a letter to members of Congress opposing the bill. Bishop Mark Seitz of El Paso, who chairs the committee, says the bill would weaken humanitarian protection for migrants. He wrote, "Provisions of this bill would endanger unaccompanied children, decimate access to asylum, limit and potentially eliminate federal partnerships with faith-based and other non-governmental organizations." Quoting St. John Paul II, he added, "Our faith also compels us to be vigilant advocates, defending against any unjust restriction on the natural right of individual persons to move freely within their own nation and from one nation to another." When we hear news about immigration, the focus is often on the pressures it causes on border communities. We don't as often look at it from a migrant's perspective. Why do they feel they have to leave their homeland? What are the reasons that cause thousands to seek refuge elsewhere? EWTN News In Depth asks those questions during a recent trip to the Dominican Republic. Here's reporter Mark Irons.
This is no land flowing with milk and honey. In fact, it's just the opposite here in the land of sugar. Alongside the sugarcane stalks, these kids are growing up in a batey. It's a slum-like settlement, home for those laboring in the sugarcane fields of the Dominican Republic. The majority of workers in these fields come from Haiti, the country next door. The Dominican sugar industry relies heavily on the work of these migrants who leave their homeland behind.
For many Haitians, a better way of life will be found right here in these bateys, living communities built around sugarcane fields where they will work for long hours with low pay.
To better understand life in a batey, we asked a Haitian who lived it.
Is that a tough situation for Haitian immigrants to grow up in that environment?
It is tough. Living in a batey is tough.
But Montse Alvarado says it's way better than living in Haiti.
It's worse in Haiti. Here in the Dominican Republic, at least people who cross the border have a hope.
With an already long history of extreme poverty and political corruption, Haiti is now in a desperate situation. In 2021, the country's president was assassinated. Law and order is spiraling out of control, and widespread gang violence has taken its place. The United Nations providing a bleak update.
The horrific violence in gang-ridden areas, including sexual violence, particularly against women and girls, is emblematic of the terror afflicting much of Haiti's population.
So whether they have legal documentation or not, Haitians feel forced to flee into the Dominican Republic. For some, it's become a matter of life and death. Tough manual labor in the sugarcane fields and living in a batey is the only option.
That's my people.
Montse Alvarado is what you might call a success story. He was born in a batey. His father cut sugarcane and eventually earned enough money to move the family into the city of La Romana in the eastern half of the Dominican Republic. Moises got a college education and is now CEO of a local hospital. He provides needed health care to Dominicans and Haitian migrants. And he's an advocate for those still living in the bateys. He says conditions have improved since he was a kid.
In general, it's getting a little better. It's better than when I was living in a batey. At least 90% of the bateys around here have a school.
Education can provide a way out of the bateys, but there's not a guaranteed exit strategy for everyone. We met Papo, a Haitian man who has lived in a batey for 30 years. Papo does not have legal status in the Dominican Republic, but he provides a needed service to the country and fills a job many Dominicans don't want. So he stays employed in the sugarcane fields without fear of deportation. But he says if he were to leave the batey,
when one leaves the batey and goes into town to purchase something or whatever, then they catch us in any way they can, and they take us.
In effect, he's stuck here. It's important to note how the U.S. government has responded to the Dominican sugar industry. Last year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported signs of forced labor in the operations of Central Romana Corporation Limited, the largest Dominican sugar producer, citing isolation, withholding of wages, abusive working and living conditions, and excessive overtime. Sugar produced by Central Romana is now banned from entering the U.S. Meanwhile, Leonie Batista is on a mission to make sure kids growing up in the bateys can leave the sugarcane behind.
I think their parents spending 55, 60 years cutting sugarcane, I think that's enough. I don't think it should go on to the next generation.
Batista runs a youth organization with the help of a nonprofit group called Cross Catholic Outreach to give children the opportunity to develop their talents and job skills.
We have English, we have plumbing, we have electricity. We just started screen printing, digital marketing, we have sewing, we have arts and craft.
At this batey outside the city of La Romana, we saw kids at the youth center dance and sing.
Well, singing is my passion, and for that reason, I hope to sing.
I was born in a batey, and I grew up in a batey.
Now this young man, Ishmael, has left the batey, and he wants to lead others. He's learned English and plans to go to college. He's inspired by adults like Moises and Leonie who want to make sure the future is a whole lot sweeter for the children who grow up here in the land of sugar.
It's a passion, it's a heartfelt thing. It's something that I believe that God placed into my heart.
Mark Irons, EWTN News In Depth.
Mark joins us now in studio with more insights from his trip to the Dominican Republic. But we're also joined by another journalist who went on that same trip, JD Long Garcia, senior editor for America Media, which will be publishing an article by JD also focused on the topic of immigration. So great to have you both. JD, this trip was personal for you. You were born in the Dominican Republic. You came to the United States when you were 7 years old, and now you're a U.S. citizen. What key impressions will you be reporting on?
Yeah, it's complex. You know, I think some of us from our countries of origin, there's things that we're very, very proud of. I'm proud to be a Dominican, but there are things that my country does that I'm kind of ashamed of. And I think some of those things we witnessed on the trip. There's some historical tensions between the Dominican Republic and Haiti that are manifested within the immigration process the way that it is. There's one border, there's one island, and there's two countries, and there's one border. And in some ways you'd think, okay, well, immigration is going to be a lot more simple there. But it's just as complex in some ways as what we're facing in the United States in terms of immigration.
Absolutely. Mark, your report, it showed us Haitian migrants working in the fields, in the sugarcane fields, and you talked about their legal status.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like for the Dominican Republic?
Well, at this point, you know, it's something that's still up for debate. I mean, obviously, sugarcane workers and their families and advocates would like to see them receive some sort of status, residency. They've been in those sugarcane fields for years. I mean, the reality is, Haitian labor is very important in the Dominican Republic. I spoke to a Dominican man who said if you were to stop Haitian labor in the sugarcane fields or in construction for a day or a week, the economy could face some serious issues. But the reality is you do have families in these fields that are afraid to leave because of deportation, sort of generations of fear behind that. Essentially, they've become permanent residents in the country, but they just don't have that official status to back it up. It's a complex situation, but we saw some of those human elements on the ground.
Absolutely, and they sound so familiar to the other countries that we're looking at these issues with, migration in Europe, but also here in the U.S. JD, in this Marian month, we consider all of the ways that Our Lady is Mother, and Our Lady of Altagracia is patroness of both Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Talk about these tensions that are brought together with this unity over prayer. Tell us about what that teaches us about these divisions we're seeing in the Caribbean.
Yeah, absolutely. But providentially, the way that the trip was structured, we got to visit the shrine of Our Lady of Altagracia the same day that we saw what Mark was mentioning about the people in the sugarcane fields, which is heartbreaking, and for everyone on the trip, a very heartbreaking sight to see people working so under such conditions. But afterwards, we had the hope that Our Lady inspires in us, that we can find common ground. I think that there's a connection between the faith of the Haitian people have, and then the people in the Dominican Republic in Our Lady, looking to her as our mother, as a source of unity, and also just that kind of even though you disagree with family members, you still get together at the table. You come together to celebrate life together, recognizing that we're all part of this larger family. And I think that with Our Lady of Altagracia, which if you're unfamiliar with the image, it's Our Lady with the Christ child, and there's kind of St. Joseph's in the back, kind of, you know, photo bombing in the picture or whatever. But it's a holy family all together. And that richness of that image, it was so moving to see her. And I think everyone was very, very moved by that, and how she continues to bring us closer together and help us recognize the human dignity in each other.
And it is that image of Our Lady that is so unique in that way. Every time that she is given to us in an image, miraculous or not, it definitely has a different flavor to it. And that Caribbean flavor of the feeling of family is just so important. Mark, you know, what was then the most impactful thing that you witnessed, seeing the context of all of the immigration stories that you've done over the years? This is one of many.
Right. Well, I think, you know, from that 30,000-foot view, you do see the divide, you do see the separation, the border. But once you're there on the ground, you see a lot of people coming together on both sides. Dominicans helping Haitians, Haitians helping Dominicans. There's a lot of collaboration in ways that you may not see, you know, on the headlines. But, you know, the people I spoke with in my story, Montse Alvarado, Leona Batista, Cross Catholic Outreach, people and groups that are really trying to bring hope in situations that appear hopeless, right? But you see on the ground an effort to bring Christ to people and into their situation. It's sort of a beautiful thing to see.
Well, it's nice to see both of you, JD and Mark, coming together with your differences and with the ways that your backgrounds have brought you together through the church to encounter this really important human issue that seems to be unresolved. So thank you both for this, and JD will be looking for your article, and Mark will be looking out for further reports from you here on In Depth. Next, we often shy away from talking about the end of life. But we take it from the Benedictines that we should all be preparing for a happy death.
It's not like I would go out one day and say, I'm going to prepare for death. It's a daily, faithful living the Benedictine way of life.
Looking past death to the celebration of the body's resurrection, we go to Benedictine College to talk to scholars, students, and clergy about how we can best prepare for the end of life. A special report just ahead.
Ten states offer physician-assisted suicide, and states like Nevada are debating whether to allow people with terminal and incurable illnesses to end their lives. Advocates of the controversial practice believe it keeps those at the end of their lives from needlessly suffering. But this month, disability groups filed a lawsuit against the state of California for its assisted suicide law because they believe it steers vulnerable people to their deaths instead of providing care and supportive services. In the lawsuit, the disability groups say that California agencies and officials are cynically generous in providing the freedom to choose death by suicide, but drastically restrict the provision of appropriate palliative, hospice, in-home care, and other supportive and protective services such that the actual supply and availability of alternatives to physician-assisted suicide is woefully inadequate to meet the demands of its aging, disabled, and chronically ill population. California has not yet commented on the litigation. Only God knows when He plans to take each of us from this earth, but it's within our power to prepare properly for our own deaths. There's a school of thought that ascribes to something called dying well. Alan Holdren tells us about it in this Catholic Life report.
What it is to die well is knowing that death is given to you as well, sort of as a call home, and being like, thank you for this beautiful life. And we also have to have the courage to be like, thank you for this beautiful suffering. Thank you for this beautiful death.
Really just surrendering to Jesus, to His will, and but not really worrying about what the future brings.
Like, some of it is just like having good personal relationships and just not having like any ties left undone. But then it's also like living life so that when you look back in it, you can just be like, I'm so happy that that's what I did.
Here at Benedictine College, death, of course, isn't likely often at the top of these students' minds, but woven into the Catholic sensibility is the desire to die well. And St. Benedict did invite his followers to keep death daily before their eyes. So the Benedictine monks on campus at St. Benedict's Abbey continue their namesake's tradition of praying every day for a happy death.
Death for the Christian, of course, won't be the end. It will be a new beginning for us. And so to keep that new beginning in our hearts every day before ourselves as a meditation, I think that's why St. Benedict is such a good patron for a happy death.
Just down the hill at the college's philosophy department, Professor Dr. Jean Rieu teaches what the great philosophers had to say about dying well.
Someone like Plato would say, when you take into account that you're going to be facing an eternity in the next life, and you compare that to the finite amount of time that you're living now, there's no mathematical comparison between the two in terms of importance. So anything you can do in this life to bring into the next eternity, right, is worth doing. What sorts of things can you bring? Well, one would be virtue, one would be knowledge. So a good life in this life is going to give you a good eternity.
It's not just a philosophical question, though, but one for a theology class. It's about meeting the Creator, an issue between each individual and God Himself.
Particularly what that good death means is that one has to get the ultimate goal of one's life correct in looking past death, but ultimately to the resurrection of the body and the hopes of the beatific vision and being united with God forever in heaven. And was really devoted to
Dr. Marielle Courtois has long studied the ars moriendi, the art of dying.
The good death is one that one orders one's whole life to the will of God, is spiritually prepared, is constantly relying on God's grace, contemplating the love of God, and then also ultimately, as St. John Paul II describes, a final act of obedience to God's will when one's final moment of death does arrive.
But what if at the end of life you're faced with some huge complication? What if the end is prolonged and there's great pain and suffering, something you pray you'll never experience but you may not be able to avoid? Bioethicists study these situations and try to provide answers.
The moment of death is the single most important moment in our entire existence, because the state of our soul at that moment determines whether we're going to heaven or hell.
Dr. Joseph Meany leads the National Catholic Bioethics Center based in Philadelphia.
There's a tendency to do what's called palliative sedation, where the person is put under, and sometimes all the way until death. And the problem with that, of course, is if they're not spiritually prepared before they go under, that's the state they're in when they die. And so I think it's very important to realize that consciousness is a value, and the U.S. bishops have spoken about this, the church has spoken about this. It's very important for individuals to be able to prepare properly, and part of that is to have a clear mind.
Just on the edge of campus, Father Jeremy Hepler runs the parish of St. Benedict. He says embracing our mortality and our immortal souls and staying close to the sacraments are keys to preparing well for death. And in his experience, it's important for the faithful to leave their wishes for their final moments in writing.
There's been moments in my experience as a pastor of great joy in those moments where peace and reconciliation truly take hold. There have also been moments of frustration when I am dealing with a family who's already made arrangements for a funeral by the time I get called, and their parent who was very faithful may have even gone to Mass every day. Because the children no longer go to church, the children choose not to have a funeral Mass for them. Fortunately, in most of those situations, we at least are able to have a funeral service.
Across the city of Atchison, Kansas, the imminence of death is very real at the Dooley Center, a nursing home run by Benedictine sisters, for Benedictine sisters and family members. In a sense, Sister Loretta McGuire came to peace with her own mortality as she prepared many of her fellow sisters for death here.
And when I worked with our sisters who are dying, when I worked with people in the community, I let them know they were dying. They might say, "What is wrong with me?" And I would say, "You are dying. Is there anything you need?" Really and truly, when we are dying, we need to step out of the way, because that is a very sacred time between the dying person and God.
Of course, dying isn't just an academic question to be studied or something that other people go through, but a very real situation that all of us must experience. None can avoid it, and when it happens, not all are prepared for it. We can only hope and pray that we will be, having lived well so as to die well. In Atchison, Kansas, Alan Holdren, EWTN News In Depth.
There's much more to consider about how we transition from this world to the next. Alan joins us now to tell us about other reports he's planning in the weeks ahead. Alan, this story is the first of a three-part series examining death and how the church helps us prepare for the next world. Tell us why you felt it was so important to talk about dying well.
Well, Montse, I started looking into it after I read an article by the bioethicist Father Tad Pacholczyk. He was talking about people making what they thought were the wrong decisions for their loved ones at the end of their lives. They were responsible for their mistakes. They were taking responsibility for them. And so they would often, they would go to see a priest about that because they thought they'd done something sinful, not on purpose. And so I thought about my own life. What would I do in a situation where maybe I had to make a decision for somebody else? And that led into this whole series that we started off with Dying Well, just to establish that sensibility and sensitivity to the issue. What does it mean to die well?
Right, and because we can make decisions about that all the time, whether it's for children, parents, etc. You have complicated situations that call on your conscience. What can we expect from the next two stories coming up?
It's exactly what you referred to just now, a nascent life piece, a piece on newborns or children that are still in the womb, parents that may have to make difficult decisions, or maybe also that child could have a terminal illness. What do they do? Who do they turn to, especially in an emergency situation? And then also at the end of the life of a loved one, what do we do? Who do we turn to when we have to make decisions regarding those we love at the end of their lives?
Well, those are really difficult conversations to have when you don't have the right resources. So we're so grateful that you're going to give this great gift to our viewers. There are many resources available online to learn more. Two that Alan used in his reporting include a Catholic guide for end of life on the website of the Archdiocese of Kansas City and theartofdyingwell.org from St. Mary's University in London. We're back right after this with top headlines in the Week in Review. The latest on the debt ceiling dilemma tops the Week in Review. The impasse continues despite a meeting in the Oval Office this week between the president and top congressional leaders. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries joined President Biden at the White House. A default on U.S. debt could happen as early as June 1st if Congress doesn't agree to lift the government's borrowing authority. In exchange for raising the debt ceiling, McCarthy is demanding massive budget cuts to curtail government spending. McCarthy said the meeting provided no movement towards a resolution of the standoff. Though he did not take the idea of default off the table, others in the meeting were adamant.
The United States is not going to default. It never has, and it never will. However, elections have consequences. We now have divided government. The solution to this problem lies with two people: the President of the United States, who can sign a bill and deliver the members of his party to vote for it, and the Speaker of the House.
We are going to meet tonight and tomorrow to try and begin talking about that appropriations process, about that budget process, to see if there can be some agreements. The disagreements are wide. And anyone who says my way or no way, and we're going to default, is not serving the country well.
Staffers did hold talks through this week. The next meeting between the president and congressional leaders was supposed to happen Friday, but it was delayed until next week as those staff discussions continue. This weekend could reveal what Pope Francis might have been referring to when he recently mentioned a secret peace mission to help end the war in Ukraine. Though the Vatican declined to officially confirm it, and officials said there is a possibility Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will visit the Pope on Saturday at the Vatican. Since the invasion, the pontiff has repeatedly pleaded for peace and has offered his help as a mediator between Kyiv and Moscow. Bolivian bishops have asked for forgiveness in response to a shocking report that recounts a Spanish Jesuit's abuse of dozens of Bolivian children. In its bombshell report, Spanish newspaper El País gathered details of Father Alonso Peraja's abuse from both victims' testimonies and his own diary, which holds hundreds of entries. In his own words, the priest says he abused 85 minors. The report also found that at least 7 provincial superiors and a dozen clergymen covered up his abuse. Bolivia's Attorney General has announced a full investigation. The Jesuits in Bolivia have promised to collaborate with the investigation, and the bishops of Bolivia say they stand in solidarity with the victims. The Holy See is making preparations for the first session of the Synod on Synodality later this year. Cardinal Mario Grech, the Secretary General of the Synod, encourages all faithful to make more space for the Holy Spirit and pray for the Synod. As News in Depth reported last week, the Vatican recently announced that lay people, including women and young people, will vote in the Synod for the first time in church history. EWTN News Vatican Bureau recently spoke with Cardinal Mario Grech to discuss the Synod and this new change in the voting body. He says the Synod is not just for bishops, but for all faithful.
The Synod is a moment where, in the past, only bishops were engaged, but now the Pope Francis introduced a new dimension of this experience that involves all the people of God. So all the church is being invited to reflect, to pray, and contribute to help the church to become more church. Because after all, if we are talking about synodality, we are talking about the church itself.
The first part of the Synod of Bishops will take place in Rome this October. The second part will commence next year. Ready for the 2025 Jubilee? The official start will begin with the opening of the Holy Door of St. Peter's Basilica in December of 2024. But you can start planning your pilgrimage now because the Vatican has launched a Jubilee website and app. The site includes a calendar of events, a listing of proposed pilgrimages, information on Jubilee churches, and information on the digital pilgrim card, which will be needed to attend Jubilee events throughout Rome. A Jubilee year is a special year of grace, where the faithful can ask for plenary indulgences. That is the remission of sins for themselves or deceased relatives. Registration for Jubilee 2025 officially begins in September, and that's when you can get your pilgrim card. An estimated 32 million pilgrims are expected to participate. You can also listen to the official hymn of the Jubilee on the website. And find out more, visit the Jubilee web address listed on your screen.
And next, a look at the preparations in Lisbon, Portugal for this summer's World Youth Day.
I've spoke to a lot of young people around the world who really want to come to Lisbon for the event, but are finding it difficult to find accommodation, or the accommodation that they see on Airbnb or in hotels. The prices are astronomical, and they're worried that they might not be able to afford it.
My advice would be, come, we'll find you a solution. I mean, there's a lot of families that are opening their places. You'll find solutions in Lisbon, but also outside of Lisbon. We have buses that will come. All the towns around Lisbon are preparing to receive people.
An appeal to young people around the globe. Come to World Youth Day 2023 this August 1st through 6th in Lisbon, Portugal. Pope Francis says it's a beautiful thing to see the enthusiasm and strength of faith in the youth who participate. He says it's an experience whose impact can last a lifetime. EWTN News In Depth sent our Vatican correspondent Colin Flynn to Lisbon to check in on preparations for the August event. Colin, great to have you with us. I know that you're going to be on the ground in August. Everyone who goes will be able to see you there. You took a tour of the site in Lisbon where World Youth Day will happen and talked about the mayor with his philosophy, the more the merrier. Tell us more about this conversation.
Hey Montse, great to talk to you, and what a joy. First of all, I am so excited and pumped to be heading to Lisbon between August the 1st and 6th to help cover World Youth Day for EWTN. It's going to be brilliant. But last week, myself and the EWTN crew, we went to the city of Seven Hills, the beautiful city of Lisbon in Portugal, and we were talking to people across the city, from young, ordinary Portuguese Catholics to the Archbishop, who is really overlooking the entire vision of World Youth Day for the city. And then we talked to the mayor, who is looking after a lot of the logistics. Now, he's a great guy, a very optimistic guy, and it has very much been in the media and the press in Portugal because there's been a little bit of controversy around the cost, the logistics. Will the city be able to host this many people that are expected? Because you have to remember, Montse, Lisbon is a city of only 500,000 people, so 500,000 people live in the capital, and they're expecting somewhere between 1 and 2 million people. So they're worried about things like toilets, accommodation. Will there be enough resources and facilities for all the young people? And I put this to the mayor, and I kind of pushed them on it, saying a lot of people are saying, yeah, they want to come, but they can't get the accommodation. It's too expensive. Will there even be places to stay? But he was resilient, Montse, and he was optimistic, and his message was just to come.
They should come. We really welcome people to come. And if there's one characteristic of the Portuguese people, it's that people like to host foreign people. They like to receive. They like to have people at home. So, you know, we will solve that. And of course, my message is that we'll find a solution. Contact your priest in your area. We'll find ways of getting in touch with you, and you'll find a way.
And so we come and we're there with our priests, with our community, and then there's going to be a stage, right? Tell us about the preparations, tell us about the construction.
Yeah, this is one of the things when I mentioned the controversy, and not to focus on that because most people are really looking forward to it, Catholics and non-Catholics alike, it has to be said, I think, in Portugal. But one of the main things that they're constructing, there's a lot of different things around the city being established for World Youth Day, but where Pope Francis will say his final Mass on August the 6th, they're constructing a stage on which they will put the altar. And this is just north to the city in a park. But this park had to be kind of built for this. They're planting grass, they're clearing out other things, and they're building the massive structure of the stage, which originally was meant to cost 5.6 million euros. That was in the media in Portugal. They've now revised that down to 2.9 million. But this is going to be the centerpiece of many of the great celebrations across this week. And it has room to they tell me, around 1.5 million young people. Wow. And when I walk the grounds with some of the construction workers, and by the way, they are ahead of schedule and coming in a little bit under budget now, which is great. But they told me that the night before, the Saturday night, they expect hundreds of thousands of young people to sleep there on the grass, just under the stars with the beautiful Lisbon heat. So it is going to be such a beautiful event. And from talking to the young Catholics across the city of Lisbon, I was just filled with their hope, their enthusiasm. They really want people to come from all over the world, Montse, to be filled with the Holy Spirit, to be encouraged and strengthened in their faith, and to go back home to their countries of origins renewed.
Well, we know that that's true. This happened with World Youth Day in 1993 in Denver here in the U.S., and we're looking forward to seeing what will happen in Lisbon and the beauty that will come from that. Thank you, Colin. If you know a young person who would benefit from attending World Youth Day, perhaps you can encourage them to find out more about it and book a flight. And that does it for this edition of EWTN News In Depth. I'm Montse Alvarado. We'll be back same time next week with more reports important to your Catholic life. We hope to see you then.